right about now, I'm questioning if this is even a good decision. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are doing a psych vid, and this one we are talking about body dysmorphia disorder, or BDD for short. And if you remember back to the learned helplessness video and other times I've talked about psych disorders, so there's the average insecurities or doubts or worries that people may have about their appearance, and body dysmorphia disorder goes beyond that. The average person might be concerned about putting on some extra pounds. They might be worried that, maybe they could have a little bit more muscle. They're losing their hair and they're a little unhappy about that. Things of that nature. So with BDD, you have those concerns cranked up to 11. In this video, I'll be focusing mostly on a review paper by Phillips and colleagues from 2012, but I will be sprinkling in other sources as we go through the video. I'm also going to do a variant of the Get Ready With Me beau-Tuber flavor of YouTube video. I swear I'm not a beau-Tuber, I promise. It's relevant. I promise. And I'm going to go through sort of the process of getting ready to shoot one of these videos and lay bare the thoughts going through my head as somebody with some disordered thoughts in this whole appearance thing. Since this was written in 2012, it's using the DSM-4, which is the last edition. Current edition is DSM-5, but anyways, the DSM-4 defines BDD as preoccupation with an imagined defect in appearance. If a slight physical anomaly is present, the person's concern is markedly excessive. Like, I've got nice cheekbones. I got compliments on that when I was younger. Just, you have to find them in all this fat. The preoccupation must cause clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning, and it cannot be better accounted for by another mental disorder, such as anorexia nervosa. The DSM is making this distinction because with the eating disorders, you do have a preoccupation with how your body looks. With anorexia nervosa, the person feels that they're fat and they need to lose weight and do different behaviors like not eating to try to get their weight down. A lot of times BDD will be missed in a clinical setting, in part because people who have this feel a lot of guilt and shame that they are experiencing these things and they have these obsessions about different aspects of their appearance, and so they don't bring it up. Although a lot of people would pursue treatment if it was brought up by their clinician, it's not something that they will willingly admit to. I mean, they might drop hints, and if a clinician is noticing these hints, they might pursue and start administering the standardized tests for BDD, which we'll talk about later in the video, and be able to help the person with this disorder. But people won't bring up these symptoms that they're having because they feel horrible and vain and awful about it. In my darker periods, I feel horrible about how I look, and I also feel horrible for feeling horrible about how I look. Because I'm not supposed to be vain, but here I am. Feeling guilty for how I look. Life is fun. So my experience with psychologists and psychiatrists is usually they stop once it's like, okay, so let's figure out what's wrong with you. Okay. Bipolar? Cool. Definitely need to get a handle on that. I also got anxiety and OCD. Cool. Definitely need to get a handle on that. And then we run out of time. And so that's all we really talk about. The one time I did bring it up with a psychiatrist, he argued with me. And basically like, no, you're not fat. Because that's what it was coming down to. And at the time I weighed a little over 120. I'm 5'3". Do not weigh that now. And he spent 5 minutes of our like 30-minute session downloading an app on his iPad to like know your BMI is in the healthy weight range. And I even prefaced all of this by saying, like, I know this is disordered, but this is how I feel and it sucks. And he basically was like, no, you're fine. You're not allowed to feel the way you feel. That's cool. As far as how many people have this in the population, if we look at the US, something like 1 to 2% of the population has it, but that rate goes up if we start looking at things like social phobias, which is an anxiety disorder, general anxiety, OCD, depression. When we're looking at those sorts of disorders, there's an increase in the prevalence rate to something like 40% from 2%. This disorder tends to start in adolescence. As you grow into your body and it changes, you might not be happy with the way it looks anymore. So my problems with how I look and my weight, or my feelings with my weight, started around adolescence for me. It was probably a combination of dance and some shitty friends that helped it really kick off, but I was having problems with how I looked before then too. My eyes are the feature that I'm least uncomfortable with on my face. Although even that's a bit iffy. Like as a kid, I would get compliments on my eyes, so that helped. But when I was still dancing, somebody who I danced with for my last show, I asked her, because she was a mat girl, if she would do my makeup, make it a little special. She agreed, but she scolded me for not having eyelids. I was like, I obviously have eyelids, thank you. I'm not walking around with my eyes just open all the time. But started trying to do like these beauty looks, and oh, yeah, I guess I kind of don't have eyelids. That's great. So watch tutorials on what to do for like hooded eyelids, because apparently that's the thing that's probably going on here. So yeah, definitely starting to feel gravity a bit, like especially in the upper eyelid area, and also just how creepy my eyelids are getting, which is great. Like this one area I didn't really hate myself for, and it starts sagging. Thanks. This can be one specific area. So maybe somebody really, really, really hates their nose, and that is the only thing that they're fixated on. Or it can be several body areas, like their nose and their cheeks and their hair and other parts of their body. It doesn't have to just be one or lots. You know, it can be both. Whatever. Directly quoting the paper now. Terms frequently used to describe the disliked body areas are ugly, unattractive, abnormal, deformed, or disfigured. Some patients describe themselves in more extreme terms, saying they look like a freak, a monster, a burn victim, or the elephant man. When I am feeling bad about myself, which does happen, I feel like I shouldn't be allowed out in public without just everything covered up. So, paper bag on my head, loose clothing. So basically, you can't really see that I'm there other than a thing moving through space. I feel unlovable. I feel like a piece of shit. Just lots of negative feelings. Appearance preoccupations can go on for several hours in the day. I mean, it's not like they wake up and have it booked that 3 hours they're going to sit in the bathroom staring at themselves in the mirror and hate it. It's spaced out throughout the day. and it can go on for several hours, and we'll talk about how these preoccupations can show up. It's not just staring at their nose in the mirror and just hating it and wishing it looked like something else. It's more complicated than that. One of the complications is a fear of rejection by others for this perceived flaw. An important thing to point out here is it doesn't have to be a real flaw, and it doesn't have to not be a real flaw. It can be something like jowls or wrinkles or other things, or it can be something that is just so incredibly minor, like a smile line or something that the person just fixates on and it feels so bad. But part of the preoccupation that many people experience is a fear that they're going to be rejected by other people because of how hideous they look or how hideous they think they look. It wasn't obvious from my technique. In real life, I don't wear makeup. I mean, please don't roast me on my videos. I do try. Loving and constructive feedback is welcome, but yeah. So I don't wear makeup day to day for lots of reasons. One is sheer laziness, because I mean, just don't like putting makeup on. It's a lot of time, it's a lot of effort. I don't like how it feels, and I have a bit of the extra gene. So, I mean, I used to dance, and so I know how to do like stage makeup or shooting for YouTube makeup. So doing like a natural look is difficult. Unfortunately, another reason I don't is I'm afraid I'll start being called out on it. The saying that you can put lipstick on a pig, it's still a pig. So if I don't put lipstick on, I can't be called pig with lipstick on. Sad little truth. I feel obligated to wear makeup for YouTube. I mean, if you couldn't tell from my complexion, I don't spend a lot of time in the sun, but time is still sort of taking its toll, and I feel like if I don't put in the effort, then any hate I get will just be a million times worse. Another reason I wear makeup for YouTube is definitely trying to hide or camouflage my problem areas, which I feel like are many, so this is a bit of a process. I feel like with age that my face is starting to melt off my face. Like the skin is starting to melt off my face. And that brings me a lot of anxiety and discomfort, and I actually reshot several videos for this channel because the makeup wasn't right, the lighting wasn't right, and it was emphasizing my jowls, which is a lovely word. Because people with BDD feel like they look horrible or monstrous or something, this leads them to feel a lot of anxiety and a lot of other negative emotions. These negative emotions, like self-loathing, anxiety, whatever, then turn to behaviors or thoughts in an attempt to try to fix those negative emotions that they're experiencing. This can also involve seeking reassurance from others about their problem areas. We haven't talked about OCD on this channel yet. It is in the works. But the rituals that people go through are very similar to repetitive patterns of behavior that you see with obsessive compulsive disorder. And people with BDD or OCD are doing these behaviors like the hand washing for OCD or trying to camouflage whatever flaw they feel they have on their face. They're doing this to try to reduce the anxiety that they feel and the negative emotions that they feel associated with the perceived flaw. So I went back and forth a lot on if this was an actual diagnosis I should be worried about, if it didn't fit me, until I was actually doing the research for this video. And I got to one of the symptoms or diagnostic criteria, which is that One of the most common repetitive behaviors that people engage in with BDD is comparing themselves to other people. This can be people in magazines, on TV. The paper kind of dates itself because, it is only talking about TV, magazines, things like that. Whereas now with Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat and all the others, we are so much more able to see the best of other people, especially like with face tuning and stuff. And so there's a lot to compare to if you have these apps going. I am very guilty of comparing myself to anyone and everyone at all times. Watching a movie, I'm comparing myself. Watching YouTube, I'm comparing myself. Walking down the street, I'm comparing myself. At the gym, definitely comparing myself. Ooh, shimmery. I'm trying, am I more attractive? No. Am I fatter? Yes. To basically anyone and everyone. So my apologies. People of the world. I am judging myself in comparison to you and finding myself lacking. The paper says that comparing is probably best conceptualized as a repetitive mental ritual. It's not something you're physically doing like a compulsion with OCD. It's a mental action that you're doing over and over and over again, and it can be very distressing for people with BDD. Another repetitive behavior that people with BDD can do is checking. Checking mirrors, checking reflective surfaces, checking their phone, like doing a selfie, just repeatedly checking on what this flaw is or the flaws and seeing maybe it's not looking so bad, maybe the camouflage is working, no, the camouflage isn't working, I need to fix this. And just you keep checking and checking and checking to maybe it's not looking bad, oh, it's looking bad. Maybe it's not looking bad, oh, it's looking bad. People with BDD might also go extra far in grooming. Depending on what their perceived flaw is, kind of dictates what they'll go extra hard in. So if they're concerned about body hair, they're probably going to spend more time shaving and tweezing and spending money on like lasering their body hair off or whatever. If they're worried about losing hair, they'll probably spend more time trying to groom their hair to make it look like they're not losing their hair. They'll spend more money on products trying to prevent hair loss. And yeah, they might change clothes several times trying to find something where they don't feel like they look awful in. They may go sort of fishing for compliments more often than the average person. So, honey, do these pants make my butt look big? Or do I look fat in this? Or does this make me look swole? Depending on where the person is with how they feel about their body, they will try to elicit feedback on that and hopefully get positive feedback, but negative feedback can ruin a person's day. For a subtype of BDD, which we'll talk about later in this video, another repetitive behavior might be hitting the gym and lifting weights, because small guy syndrome is part of this, and it does tend to happen more to men than women. I imagine my mom drove my dad crazy by seeking reassurance about how she looks and all of that, because I probably did something similar, because those toxic friends I had were very much like, oh, I'm fat, and would want you to no, you're not fat, you're fine, you're totally not fat. And my dad probably heard me doing that once and was like, basically, if you repeat something often enough, then people will believe you. Basically, the bottom line is don't repeat that stuff, because then people will think you're fat. So I didn't do that. I danced in high school, and some of college, and before high school. And so very much a lot of body image issues and eating disorders and the whole 9 yards. And yeah, I mean, I don't have a great relationship with food. Somehow managed to never kick off an eating disorder proper, I think. But I was never one to say, oh, I'm fat, even though I was totally feeling it as much as my skinny friends were saying it, even though I was arguably more overweight than they were. Basically, up until I was in a pretty solid relationship with my now husband, then boyfriend, I didn't voice those insecurities about being fat, overweight, unattractive. Had him plenty, but I just kept my mouth shut about them. There have been studies done looking at gender differences in the presentation of BDD because, unsurprisingly, with the social norms and how men are expected to look and how women are expected to look, there are differences in how this disorder presents itself. Bottom line, with the different experiments that were done, the BDD for men and women tend to gravitate more towards what the social norms are for the two genders. So men are expected to be more muscular and have hair and, just be the stud muffins on the cover of GQ or whatever. The men who have BDD, their issues or their perceived flaws tend to revolve around things like hair, musculature, body size. I mean, height is another thing that men really get hammered on, especially if they're like trying to date. Short men get the short end of the stick on this. And for short men, their height can be an issue. Another thing that guys may find themselves fixated on is genital size. This humor's kind of shifting to becoming less acceptable, but joking about a guy's penis size is easy and low-hanging fruit to joke about. A lot of people, if they want to insult a guy, they go straight to his dick size because it is a sore area for a lot of guys and they're insecure about it, even though they may be perfectly average or even above average. They feel insecure because of something that happened, the general whatever, like they feel insecure about their genital size. For women, it tends to revolve around what society views as beautiful. Currently, in Western society, we have like a Kim Kardashian sort of standard where they're supposed to be hourglassed, where we're supposed to be hourglass shaped, large breasts, big butt, itty bitty waist, like the Sir Mix-a-Lot song. And a lot of women are undergoing procedures to try to attain that look or buying body wraps to try to train that and doing all sorts of things to try to attain what is deemed attractive. I have a weird relationship with my eyebrows. They are like two giant caterpillars on my head, and I recognize that. But I also don't want to try to tame them myself because I feel like I'd have nothing left, and then that would just be bad. And yeah, like I knew somebody in high school who went somewhere and they like tweezed back far or waxed or something, and they never grew back. So that kind of scared me. But yeah, so I hate how big they are, but I don't want to risk making it look weirder by doing it myself. A huge part of BDD is anxiety and negative emotions associated with the perceived flaws. And as such, people with BDD might avoid certain situations or behaviors or whatever that put them in a place where their flaw could be made fun of or noticed or emphasized even. Another thing is I hate having pictures taken of me, which is kind of funny, seeing as how it's a good job me. But I mean, that's kind of going back into why I'm doing the full face of production makeup because just my skin in its natural state and the lines and shadows and things I am not a huge fan of. One common form of avoidance behavior with BDD is camouflaging. And camouflaging can take many forms. So it can be in the form of makeup, trying to hide perceived flaws in the skin. It can be camouflaging the body. If a person thinks that they're fat or too skinny, or, it goes both ways. A person may dress to try to hide what they think is wrong with their body. It can also be things like hats, especially for like thinning hair, or sunglasses, because some people are worried about the size of their eyes. Frequently, it's that their eyes are too small, and so they wear sunglasses indoors to try to hide their perceived flaw. Another form of camouflage is holding your body in a way that sort of hides the perceived flaw. So you might sit with your arms crossed in front of you to try to hide a larger or perceived to be larger midsection. For guys who feel like they're lacking in muscle, sitting with your arms crossed actually can help push up the bicep so it looks larger. And so that behavior can be done for many different reasons. Camouflaging of like the makeup variety or futzing with your hair can be done several times throughout the day. And, touching up makeup is normal and acceptable, or average. If you're doing it 25 times a day, now we're talking about doing it kind of to an excessive level. So I tend to go with the camouflage route in general. Like I think I said somewhere before, baggy sweater, exhibit A, baggy pants. I'm wearing sweats for my grad school. And just try to hide everything. And this is great doing it in the summer. I will continue to do it until it is just too ungodly hot to continue to do that. I will wear a sweater until it's like 90 out, and then I'll wear like sort of a sun jacket until it gets to like 110. And then beyond that, I can't. And then I'm really self-conscious about people seeing me and how fat I am and judging me and being disgusted, losing their lunch, Another study that I'll talk about here briefly looked at people's appraisal of themselves and their problem areas and how they think other people must view them. And the interesting thing with this is people with BDD did identify their problem areas as very unattractive and disgusting and all of those things. And their rating of how other people must view them was also negative, but less so. So there is a little bit of insight there that maybe it's not as bad as they think it is, but they still think it is a problem to other people. So a takeaway from that paper is maybe that society isn't necessarily making people with BDD feel bad about themselves per se, but their expectation of what society thinks of them or thinks of their flaws is causing them to feel bad. So there are societal pressures to look a certain way and to conform to beauty standards or to be viewed as attractive, but there's an extra step of that and an extra step of expectation of how society views them for people with BDD. A subform of BDD that tends to happen more in men than in women is muscle dysmorphia. Going with the definition from the paper, muscle dysmorphia is a form of BDD that consists of preoccupation with the idea that one's body is insufficiently muscular or lean, or that it is too small. These individuals look normal, and some, especially those who abuse anabolic steroids or excessively work out, may be very muscular. So for people with this subtype of BDD, there may be a lot of reflection checking. I mean, gyms are full of mirrors, and a very strict diet, and overtraining to the point where it's starting to do damage to their body. There's a lot of really built guys out there who get built because they have these very rigorous training routines, and they're super cut because they're doing a super lean diet and they're doing this to achieve a certain look. And this isn't to say that they have BDD. Certainly a bunch of guys out there do this and can do it with a relatively healthy mindset. Like, they want to see how far they can push themselves. They want to see how much weight they can lift. They want to see how swole they can get, whatever. The difference comes down to if the person feels like they're being judged as scrawny or inadequate, or people are laughing at them for their size, or if they're doing it sort of to push themselves. As I mentioned before, in a different way, people with BDD tend to have higher levels of anxiety, lower levels of self-esteem, and higher rates of depression than the average population. There's also a relationship where the more severe the BDD is, the more severe the depression, the anxiety, and these other symptoms are. It's been proposed in some cognitive experiments looking at like attention allocation, as well as fMRI studies looking at what the brain's doing when processing this stuff, that people with BDD are having a problem with how they're processing information. It's proposed that people with BDD are processing the individual features, especially those that they are perceiving as flaws, instead of the face or the body as a whole. So their attention is focusing in on these parts instead of processing sort of the gestalt of the whole of the face or of the body. Instead of seeing a full body, they're seeing like the cottage cheese legs and, the fat and everything else. One of the areas I really felt self-conscious about first was this guy. It was definitely like my first major crease, because that really goes crazy when I cry. And this is awful. When I'm having like an awful, inconsolable crying fit, because I'm so worried about this crease, I will hold my eyebrow, because it will just like, and I'll just try to hold it, and there's a lot of stress built up in there. And this is region number 2. ContraPoints, in her latest video on beauty, talked about face tuning, which I do not let myself play with because that would be a dangerous road to go down. But with face tuning, when she does it and sees pictures of herself or undoctored pictures, the parts that she would face tune, like I think her nose was one of the areas, those really jumped out at her as like, this is a problem. And so with face tuning, like, you're specifically going in and emphasizing certain parts to your attention to fix. And so it's sort of forcing you into that part processing instead of the whole processing. Another fMRI experiment found overlap in processing pathways, so basically how information is sort of shuffled around the brain. And they found overlap between OCD pathways and body dysmorphia disorder pathways. So maybe there's something going on there where there's just this positive feedback loop that forms in the brain and kind of goes haywire. There have been some causal factors put forward for the development of BDD. Now, certainly everybody with BDD doesn't have all of these. You could have some, you could have none, you could have all if you're truly unfortunate, but here they are. People with BDD may have been teased as a child about certain aspects of their features, which drew their attention to it and then sort of kicked off that positive feedback loop. They may have suffered emotional abuse or neglect by their parents when they were children, which leads to a whole host of problems, and BDD is one of them. Another factor that's associated with BDD is perfectionism as a personality trait. Now, wanting to do a good job on things and get things top-notch and the best that you can do, totally fine. Perfectionism takes that too far, and it's a bit of a neurotic trait where you reshoot a video several times because the lighting isn't right. You basically need things to be perfect, and you go above and beyond to try to get things perfect, whereas good enough is usually good enough most of the time. These things. I damn near deleted my channel when I saw how bad they were. Like, I shot the intro video for the first time. I'm feeling so good and so happy about it, and then I looked at the footage and I cried because, oh my god, how could I have not have known that these were as bad as they are? Bought the ring light and tried the best I could to conceal it with makeup. Had some misadventures there. So yeah, I recorded the intro video 3 times. Another feature associated with BDD is an overly reactive behavioral inhibition system. So normally you have behaviors and there's feedback loops, in this case negative feedback loops, to try to rein those behaviors in. So fixing your hair, cool, you can do that a couple times. And if you feel like there's a flaw there and that behavior isn't reined in, it can sort of spiral out of control and feed back in on itself in that positive feedback loop. Part of the goal with this paper that I'm reviewing is for clinicians to realize that BDD is a condition that their clients might come in with and how to treat it the best. And this paper is really trying to emphasize that this is very distressing for people with BDD and they need to be taken seriously. Don't argue with them about the relative merits of whether or not the nose issue is something that they should feel insecure about. That's not going to help, and that shouldn't be part of your treatment plan. Instead, you need to really empathize with them, try to get them to a place where they feel okay with it, and not have the obsession or the fixation on whatever that flaw is. As I mentioned earlier, it isn't something that most people with BDD will be very forthcoming about because there is a lot of shame and guilt associated with feeling very vain about something that may be relatively minor. And so clinicians really need to be mindful if a person seems to be holding themselves a certain way or throwing off certain clues that they perceive some part of themselves to be critically flawed, and then to move forward from there. And one of the best ways to move forward, in my opinion, is with standardized tests. And video for another day, but standardized tests are a good way for clinicians and researchers to be able to get a handle on if a person has a certain disorder, condition, whatever, and how severe that condition might be. Body dysmorphic disorder, modification of the Y box. All these questions, unless otherwise noted, work on a 0 to 4 scale, with 0 meaning none. You don't spend any time working on whatever the question stem is, and it doesn't really impact you. 4 being it's a severe issue for you. You spend a lot of time dealing with whatever the question's asking about, something like 8 hours a day devoted to whatever. Number 1, time occupied by thoughts about the body defect. And please list what body defects you believe you have. How much of your time is occupied by thoughts of the defect or flaw? Wrinkles, moderate. Jowls, severe. And then weight and like body size related stuff, severe. Number 2, interference from thoughts about the body defect. How much do your thoughts impact your ability to function socially or at work or at school? Said another way, is there anything you aren't doing because of these thoughts? Spending time with friends? No. Dating? No. Attending social functions? No. Doing things with family inside or outside of the home? Yes, moderate. Going to school or work each day? No. Being on time for or missing school/work? No. Focusing at school/work? Not really, no. Productivity at school/work? Some, editing yourself when you're feeling particularly down on how you're looking is fun. So let's go with moderate. Doing homework or maintaining grades. No. Daily activities in general. Mild. How much distress do your thoughts about the body defect cause you? Depends on the day, really. Some days mild, some days extreme. For each item, circle the best response that represents the patient during the past week. Number 4, resistance against thoughts about the body defect. How much of an effort do you make to resist these thoughts? Try to resist most of the time, and oh no. How often do you disregard these thoughts or turn your attention away from these thoughts as they enter your mind? Make some effort to resist. With these, it's important to rate how much effort the person is doing, not actual success. So they can be having a lot of negative thoughts and be trying to fight them off and still have them, but they are trying to fight them off. Number 5, degree of control over the thoughts about the body defect. How much control do you have over the thoughts about the body defect? Little to moderate control. How successful are you at stopping or diverting these thoughts? Moderately successful. You. Number 6, time spent in activities related to the body defect. The next several questions are about activities or behaviors you do because of the body defect. How much time do you spend in activities related to concern over your body defect? Checking mirrors or other surfaces? Mild. Grooming activities? Mild. Applying makeup? Mild on average. For days I shoot, let's say moderate. Excessive exercise, meaning more than 1 hour a day. So on average, this is okay, but depending on how you define it, some days it's a problem. So I don't go to the gym every day, obviously. I go 3 times a week, 4 times a week, and I'm there for like an hour and a half. So if you only look at the days I'm at the gym, it's a problem, but if you do on average, it's not a problem. Camouflaging with clothing or other cover. And this isn't time spent wearing the clothes, it's time spent changing outfits and trying to futz with it and to address the body defect. Mild to moderate. And it's easier with the YouTube lifestyle and you don't leave the house most days. Scrutinizing others' appearance. Basically the comparing. Probably severe, if we're being totally honest. Questioning others about your appearance or discussing your appearance with others. Mild to moderate. I mean, go back to the story with my dad discouraging me talking like that. Otherwise it'd probably be a lot worse. It's definitely a lot worse for my husband. He gets to hear the bulk of it. My best friend Lily hears some of it, but not all of it. Picking at skin? Never. Other? Anything else? Number 7, interference due to activities related to the body defect. How much do these activities interfere with your social or work or school functioning? None to mild. I do what I have to. I mean, in part because I'm running out of fucks to give on some things. I think that kind of comes with age. Just kind of lose the ability to care as things go on. Number 8, distress associated with activities related to the body defect. How would you feel if you were prevented from performing these activities? So I hate when the weather forces me to wear something sleeveless, like not a sweater, not a jacket, and I hate it. How anxious would you become? Terribly. Like, I feel like I'm being judged by everyone, even though I know that most people, I mean, maybe they look at me because of my hair color now, but for the most part, people don't care about you. And it doesn't change the fact that I feel like I need to impress everyone. Like, one of the things I hear from my husband a lot is, who are you trying to impress with the makeup, with whatever outfit that I'm changing into because I hate what I'm currently wearing? And I tell him, just everyone. Number 9, resistance against compulsions. How much of an effort do you make to resist these activities? I try to resist the negative thoughts, especially like if I'm looking at myself in the mirror. There are some days where I just won't make eye contact with myself in the mirror at all in the bathroom. Just not look, which is fun. But I do have a hard time not comparing myself to everyone. And I have a really hard time wearing clothes that I'm not hiding in, honestly. Number 10, degree of control over compulsive behaviors. How strong is the drive to perform these behaviors? How much control do you have over them? Other than dressing loosely, I don't have a lot in the way of overt behaviors, so this one's not too bad. Number 11, insight. When we're talking about psychological disorders, insight basically means that the person with the disorder knows that they're doing things or that it's not really what the situation is, how reality works, whatever, but they still feel compelled to do these things. Is it possible that your defect might be less unattractive or less of a problem than you think it is? Probably. My husband likes the way I look. He tells me regularly. And not just, I like the way you look. You're beautiful, or you're pretty, or you're sexy, or whatever. And tries to get me to not think that I'm the butter troll I think I am. And I wish I could believe him. At best, I feel average, partially because at some point I was told by a friend that I'm forgettable. So I'm sure that plays a role in it. So on a good day, I feel like a 5 on a good day. And I'm not saying this to try to elicit, oh no, you would never. I don't. The point of me doing this is to just give an honest, this is what's going through my head. How convinced are you that fill-in body part is as unattractive as you think it is? Pretty convinced. I kind of have this feeling if the channel ever does get more traction, more subscribers, that my comments are just going to be filled with the reality that I think. So mirroring my insecurities about how I look, basically. Your teeth are fucked up. Get off the internet. You're fat. You have a double chin. Your jowls are disgusting. You look like a basset hound. That sort of thing. Can anyone convince you that it doesn't look so bad? Maybe. Feels like it would have to be an unbiased person, and I'm really good at finding ways that people are biased. So my husband's biased because he has the sunk cost fallacy going on. He can't see me as I really am. My best friend, I feel is hunning me. You look great, hun. To steal the thing from ContraPoints. My mom can't give me an honest appraisal. It would have to be some rando, on the street, telling me that I'm not awful. And I don't get that. It's kind of sad, but I don't get catcalled. I don't live in areas, and I don't go out where I would get catcalled. But I feel like I would find it very validating if it happened, because otherwise I'm just part of the scenery. Number 12, avoidance. Have you been avoiding doing anything, seeing anybody, going places because of concerns about your body appearance and defect? Kind of. I don't like going to the gym because I feel like a fat old hag compared to a lot of the women that go there. So that sucks, but I do go, at least. We have a swimming pool here, and I haven't been in it yet because whale sighting. The next test is the fear of negative evaluation appearance scale. It's FNAES, I guess. This works on a 1 to 5 scale, not at all too extremely. Number 1, I am very concerned about what others think about my appearance. Very. Number 2, it bothers me if I know someone is judging my physical shape. Very. Number 3, I worry that people will find faults with how I look. Very. Number 4, when I meet new people, I worry about how they judge my appearance. Very. Number 5, I'm very afraid that people will notice my physical flaws. Very. Number 6, I think that other people's opinions of my appearance is too important to me. Very. This paper really emphasizes that it's important for the clinician to really lay the groundwork with their client. You need to establish trust, you need to establish empathy, that the person will be taken seriously. They're not a bad person for feeling the way they feel about this perceived flaw or defect, and that there is hope for them to be able to come to terms with it. The paper also really emphasizes that the clinician really needs to keep in mind how negative the person feels about this particular flaw that they think they have. Some people do respond well to certain psychopharmacological treatments. The ones that seem to have the best of luck are the serotonin ones. So the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors are the ones that are usually done as a first string if we're going to try treating this with drugs. Cognitive behavioral therapy is, again, one of the things that should be tried if a person is seeking treatment for BDD. And these basically work on restructuring their thoughts about how they look. It also focuses on exposure, and we'll talk about exposure several times, I'm sure. But with this, you basically throw the person into the deep end of the pool. You have them look at the flaw, touch the flaw, take pictures of the flaw, go out in public with the flaw exposed, just really try to get them over the negative feelings that they have by just immersing them in situations where this negative thing that they have or that they think they have is on full display and nothing bad is really happening, hopefully. Another focus of cognitive behavioral therapy is ritual prevention. Part of the restructuring of thoughts is, especially if they're comparing themselves against other people, stop that. If you're going to compare yourself, let's redirect, re-engage your thoughts onto something else, something more productive, something more healthy. Another example of ritual prevention would be if somebody changes their clothes a bunch of times before leaving the house, they get to pick one outfit. That's it. You are preventing that ritual that they've done to try to cope with this from happening. Cosmetic treatment. For BDD, plastic surgery is strongly advised against. It usually, 95% of the time, does not help. The person needs to work sort of on their inside before trying to address whatever the outside flaw is. And maybe through that work, they may realize that the perceived flaw isn't that bad, it's something they can live with, and they won't need to go through with the plastic surgery. Unfortunate side effect sometimes of surgery is it actually makes the condition worse. So not only is the whatever flaw still there, but now the person feels like it was better before, I've made it worse, and now I need to fix it even more than I did before. I think this is an interesting distinction between BDD and gender dysphoria. So people who are transgender, when they're going through the transition, if they go through the transition, may feel some degree of gender dysphoria where they are unhappy with their appearance because it doesn't match their gender. So if somebody was born male but is transitioning to being a woman, the gender dysphoria would then be things that look mannish. And so an interesting distinction between BDD and gender dysphoria is surgery actually can help with gender dysphoria, whereas body dysmorphia, surgery doesn't help so much. And then you have the overlap between the two. Somebody may have body dysmorphia and gender dysphoria. So somebody may be self-conscious about their jawline and do things to try to conceal their jawline, make it look more feminine, whatever. And so they may go through the surgery and it may stop triggering the gender dysphoria because it's looking more feminine, but it can still trigger the body dysmorphia if they just don't like the shape of their jaw, if they've got like the leafy jaw where they don't have a strong jawline and always look like this in pictures. It can still be an issue, and surgery might not address that. Let's go over the DSM criteria for body dysmorphic disorder. The other video I'm shooting today is about personality disorder, and I think I've talked about the DSM in other videos, but basically, if you're not familiar, this is the American Psychological Association standard way of organizing the psychological disorders. And there's others in the works by other organizations, but for now, this is one that pretty much the psychologists and psychiatrists, to some extent in the US, use in talking about the different disorders. So, the criteria for BDD in the DSM are: first, a preoccupation with one or more perceived defects or flaws in physical appearance that are not observable or appear slight to others. These flaws may exist, they might not exist, but to other people, they need to be minor. I was talking about this with my husband last night, and he had the completely random example of, well, what if somebody's born with their nose upside down on their face? Like, that would be, in our society, that would be a definite flaw, and so would not count towards BDD. This is something that does need to be fixed and is a reasonable thing to want to fix and to have a problem with. And so for BDD, these flaws need to be not perceptible to other people or not really that bad to other people looking at the person. The second criteria is that at some point during the course of the disorder, the individual has performed repetitive behaviors, examples being mirror checking, excessive grooming, skin picking, reassurance seeking, or mental acts. Examples being comparing their appearance with that of others in response to the appearance concerns. So basically, if a person feels insecure about some aspect of themselves, but they never really do anything with it, like they don't compare themselves to others, they don't excessively check the mirror, they don't bug people about their appearance, it wouldn't qualify for BDD. The third criteria is that the preoccupation causes clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other areas of functioning. This is a pretty standard requirement for the different disorders. If the person isn't distressed by whatever's going on, then they're not suffering from a disorder. And so you get into kind of weird territory with this, with like schizophrenia, where if the person isn't distressed, then what's the problem? But schizophrenia has a bit of a different diagnostic criterion on this one. The final DSM criteria for BDD is that the appearance preoccupation is not better explained by concerns with body fat or weight in an individual whose symptoms meet diagnostic criteria for an eating disorder. Basically, this is trying to distinguish BDD from the eating disorders, because the eating disorders do need to have very different treatment goals and plans in place than with BDD, because with BDD, chances are the person isn't going to be endangering their life. But with the eating disorders, if they're not eating enough calories or if they're engaging in binging, they're putting their health at risk. And so how you treat it is different based on if it's an eating disorder or not. So I used to dance up until I was 19. I'm built like a gorilla, and I was told by my ballet teacher that, I may be talented, but I have no future in dance. So don't get my hopes up, because I had been in the Nutcracker twice as a rat, but I was auditioning for things in local companies and not getting them. And she told me, like, you don't have the body for dance. I've never been diagnosed with an eating disorder. I've managed to avoid that part of the disorder spectrum, but I do have a very disordered relationship with food. So even when I was like 10 to 15 pounds lighter than I am now, I wasn't happy with my weight. I mean, I'm right at the high end of healthy for my height and weight, so I should be okay, especially because I'm doing like strength training, but I'm not happy with my weight. I count every calorie that goes into my body and have been weighing myself pretty much daily since 2009 in an effort to lose weight. Growing up, my mom, who is like 5'2", 5'1", somewhere in there, she was somewhere between like 200 and 300 pounds, oscillating. And so growing up, I was terrified of being fat. And it sort of is one of my OCD things of catching fat, which is completely stupid and an awful thing to say, but it's one of my fears of contamination. In middle school, and up until I started dating my husband in high school, I would not eat breakfast. For lunch, I might have a Coke and then like something out of the vending machine, so like a zebra cake or something, and then not eat until dinner. So that's not good. And I think I kind of messed up my metabolism doing that. Whoops. One of the sad things is something that I would find very validating is if somebody told me they were worried about my weight. Like, you need to eat more. Like, we're really concerned about how low your weight is. And I've never gotten that. And it's sad that I'd find that really validating, but I would. And something that the standardized tests kind of get at is the level of insight the person has about their disorder. Some people can realize that, yeah, I have a huge problem, and I know it's a huge flaw for me, and that it's really not that much of a problem for other people. But for others, there's less insight, and it feels like everybody in the world views this as a huge problem. And that's it for body dysmorphic disorder. If you have any questions, hit me up in the comments or on Twitter. And you're also welcome to hit me up on Patreon. See you guys in the next video. Bye.